Welcome, everyone. Thank you for your presence in this webinar hosted by the Urantia Association's Education Committee. Today, we have the participation of Rick Lyon, who will present the second part of his webinar, The Greatest of All. During the meeting, we ask you please mute yourself if you are not speaking to avoid disturbing background noises. If you want to speak, please raise your hand and unmute yourself. Please use the chat only for webinar-related questions and use headphones if you can to improve sound quality and to reduce echo background noises when speaking. The session will be recorded for future study purpose use. The videos will be made available to the public in the Urantia Association YouTube channel. Turn off your camera if you do not like your image being used for records, and ask to speak off the record at any time when you do not want your say to be part of the videotape. This way, your part will be cut out of the video during editing. Thank you, Rick, for your willingness to serve as always. The session is yours now.
All right, thanks, Jeannie. I'm doing a PowerPoint here, so I'm going to share my screen. And if you have the participants' videos on the side of the screen, it might be helpful if you click and drag that up to the top of the screen so they're across the top. Because I made all the PowerPoint screens to where the text will be lower so that you can see it easier that way. You know, if we had a larger group, we'd raise our hands, but I think just if you have a comment to make, just jump right in there and let us know you want to say something, and we'll do that. I'll offer you a chance to read a quote if you'd like to, and if you read the quote, you get the first chance to comment on it. If anyone wants to read it, I'll read it, and then we'll open it up for comments after that. So, Jeannie, if you would, just let me know when you see someone that wants to speak. And there's Alfonso. Hey, Alfonso, how you doing? Good to have you. So I'm going to share my screen. Okay, as Jeannie said, I think it was 3 weeks ago, we had the part one of The Greatest of All, and we'll recap some of that for you and then get into the part that we didn't get finished last time. So appreciate everybody being here today, and just feel free to jump in, and if you have a question, just say so. If you want to stop, we'll stop. And so we'd like to get everybody to participate as much as we can. Okay, so this course came about from this quote: "Of all human knowledge, that which is the greatest value is to know the religious life of Jesus and how he lived it." And I have the word greatest there highlighted because the word greatest caught my attention. And one of the things that I want to accomplish with this course is something that we've done in our study group, and that's to do like a word search. The book being on the different Urantia websites, you know, they all have search engines, and I've discovered that that is a very powerful tool for study. It's a very interesting way to study the text and pull out the meanings of certain words. It highlights the meaning of that word and the different meanings of that word, and it brings in a wide variety of topics that word relates to. So the word greatest caught my attention, so I searched for that through the text and pulled up many quotes about it. And I saw that there were several quotes that said the greatest of all. And so I think when the Urantia book says this is the greatest or the greatest of all, it's something that we really need to pay attention to. So today we're going to study the word greatest, and but let me recap here real quick some of the ones from the greatest of all. So I'll read a few of these, and then we get to the greatest, and we'll get started here. But some of the ones we read last time that really stuck out was this one. First of all, I think there were several good ones, but I just picked out 2 or 3 to kind of recap where we were and get us going here. But, the same adjuster now reflects in the inscrutable nature of his mighty personality the pre-baptismal humanity of Joshua ben Joseph, the eternal and living transcript of the eternal and living values which the greatest of all Urantians created out of the humble circumstances of a commonplace life as it is lived to the complete exhaustion of the spiritual values attainable, immortal experience. So Jesus truly was the greatest of all Urantians, and that's what it's saying there. But he was also, a lot of that came, began with the humble circumstances he lived in as a human, as a mortal. And then this one we found, particularly interesting because it really relates to how we can take the book and the teachings and apply them to our own daily life. And, we face many problems each day. And, I'd hate to stop and count how many problems we face each day and actually solve. But, sometimes we need a little help with the bigger ones. And this quote says, this is from Rodin, "But the greatest of all methods of problem solving I have learned from Jesus, your master. I refer to that which he so consistently practices and which he has so faithfully taught you, the isolation of worshipful meditation. And this habit of Jesus going off so frequently by himself to commune with the Father in heaven is to be found the technique, not only of gathering strength and wisdom for the ordinary conflicts of living, but also of appropriating the energy for the solution of the higher problems of a moral and spiritual nature. But even correct methods of solving problems will not compensate for inherent defects of personality or atone for the absence of the hunger and thirst for true righteousness." So, Jesus' example of worshipful meditation is one way that we can help solve the big problems in our life too. So if anyone has any comment on these as we go through, that's fine, just jump in there. And then I think this is the last one, of the greatest of all, that I selected here. "During the years that Jesus lived among his followers, they did indeed have much proof of his divine nature. But just now they are about to witness new evidences of his humanity. Just before the greatest of all the revelations of his divinity, his resurrection, must now come the greatest proof of his mortal nature, his humiliation and crucifixion." I had one more here, I guess. "Jesus brought to God as a man of the realm the greatest of all offerings, the consecration and dedication of his own will to the majestic service of doing the divine will. Jesus always and consistently interpreted religion wholly in the terms of the Father's will. When you study the career of the Master as concerns prayer or any other feature of the religious life, look not so much at what he taught as to what he did." So I think this tells us a lot about what we can give to God too. The greatest of all offerings that Jesus himself gave to God was the consecration and dedication of his own will to the doing of the Father's will. And I think that says, that's the same for us, that the greatest gift we can give to God is our willingness to do his will. So now let's get into the word greatest. So we studied the greatest of all, and now we're just going to study things that are the greatest. So, and let's see here. Here we go. So I'll read this first one, and we'll go from there. If anyone wants to read the next one, so I'll read this one. "How futile to make puerile appeals to such a God, to modify his changeless decrees so that we can avoid the just consequences of the operation of his wise natural laws and righteous spiritual mandates. Be not deceived, God is not mocked. For whatsoever man sows, that shall he also reap. True, even in the justice of reaping the harvest of wrongdoing, this divine justice is always tempered with mercy. Infinite wisdom is the eternal arbiter which determines the proportions of justice and mercy which shall be meted out in any given circumstance. The greatest punishment, in reality an inevitable consequence for wrongdoing and deliberate rebellion against the government of God, is the loss of existence as an individual subject of that government. The final result of wholehearted sin is annihilation. In the last analysis, such sin-identified individuals have destroyed themselves by becoming wholly unreal through their embrace of iniquity. The factual disappearance of such a creature is, however, always delayed until the ordained order of justice current in that universe has been fully complied with. Okay, so the greatest punishment is not to burn in hell or that kind of thing that we're often taught. The greatest punishment is to become as if we had never been. Our life is just, we just disappear. And so we lose that existence. So that is our greatest punishment. And probably the second greatest punishment is to reap what we sow. We do things and there are consequences to it. We do good things tend to happen. We do bad things happen. So, you know, that's what it means by reaping what we sow. So I'll open it up now for anyone else have any comments on this one?
I have a question.
Sure, Jane, go ahead.
Please. Why do you think, in your understanding, the wrongdoing and deliberate rebellion against the government of God is loss of existence, and the final result of wholehearted sin is annihilation? Why do you think, which is the basic reason for this? Many people question this in the study groups, why this happens, because they say, if God is mercy, is infinite love, why this happens? What do you think?
I think that's because, you know, it says God's mercy, they go to extreme ends. You know, it says in the book that they risk even a system rebellion. They would rather risk an entire system rebellion than to deny one person of the ability to achieve eternal life. So they do every absolute thing possible to prevent this annihilation of an individual. So, but if, I think when it gets to that point, when they've exhausted every possibility and there's no spiritual potential left to this person, it's the spiritual reality, it's the spiritual nature that is our actual reality. You know, this mortal body is not our reality. What is our reality is our spiritual nature. And when that spiritual nature is either exhausted or found not to have any potential or not exist, then we become unreal to the spiritual kingdom, I guess. So that is when we cease to exist, when there is no possibility of our spiritual continuation.
Thank you, Rick.
Go ahead, Susan.
I'd like to add a little bit here.
You go ahead, Dave.
This is Dave. In the Urantia Book, if you look up the word lavish, it states that God has provided lavish mercy to ensure the survival of all humans who really desire eternal life. So those who do not desire eternal life will be extinguished at some time. And also those who reject God's plan of seeking perfection and higher reality, if somebody absolutely rejects that plan, then they'll be extinguished. That's the only two conditions that I see. So the vast majority, I believe, will have eternal life.
Right, I would agree with that. Yeah, go ahead, Susan.
What I was going to say is, I remember the pattern of our local universe, Jesus, Michael, being our parent, does not rule on eternal life. His love would prevent that. And I think that pattern is the same for the universal Father. He doesn't rule on annihilation or loss of life. He designates the Ancients of Days to do that job, because as a parent, it would be impossible for him to do that. So his love, and it says in several places in the Urantia Book about his character, his love, God is love. That always takes precedence over justice. So this justice system that he has set up takes that away from his own personal participation in anyone having a loss of life because of rebellion. So in my mind, I know the Ancients of Days are set up to be just and merciful, lavishly, like Dave said, but still, they are the actual ones that would determine loss of life. And I don't see that it could happen any other way, because it would be impossible for God to do that.
All right, thanks. And I think to kind of pick up on what Susan said there too, we've talked about like the Lucifer rebellion. Why hasn't that been adjudicated, and why wasn't Lucifer just annihilated and done with? Because, when you think about it, I did a presentation at Wisconsin thing here a while back, and part of that in there was what I was talking about was family crisis. And one of the examples I gave was how the Lucifer rebellion was one of Jesus's family crisis. He had a lot of family crisis, and when Joseph died, when the baby Amos died, and the separation and disagreement with his family later on, and the problems he had with Jude and that sort of thing. But his greatest family crisis is the Lucifer rebellion, because Lucifer is one of his children. So Christ Michael is not willing to judge him, and that's left to the Ancients of Days for that reason, because I don't know if anybody's seen the movie The Shack. Am I right about all that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So there's a movie called The Shack, and it's a book, and it's a very good movie. And in that movie, there's a scene that I think relates to this. And the storyline is that this family has their daughter kidnapped, and the daughter is, like a 9-year-old girl, and she's kidnapped and murdered and all this kind of stuff. And the father is very angry with God. And so the storyline goes that God actually invites him to the shack where his daughter was killed. And so there he meets God. And one of the things in that movie is that he's criticizing God for, not condemning the murderer, or for not judging him, or that sort of thing. So they put him in a situation where he has to judge. And they bring his 2 children there, his son and his daughter, and he says, well, your son did this and your daughter did this. Now you have to decide which one dies. And the father says, well, I can't do that. And they say, well, but that's exactly what you're asking God to do. God has a child here who's rebelled, and has another child that's, done something wrong. And you're asking God to choose, but yet you're refusing to do that yourself. So then the guy breaks down, he apologizes and says, now I understand. So I think that's part of what we're seeing here, like what you're saying about that. So I kind of drug that out a little bit, sorry. So,
excellent. Thank you.
Any other comments on this one? Okay. Well, we'll go to the next one then. Okay. Susan, would you like to read this one?
Sure. After all, the greatest evidence of the goodness of God and the supreme reason for loving him is the indwelling gift of the Father, the adjuster who so patiently awaits the hour when you both shall be eternally made one. Though you cannot find God by searching, if you will submit to the leading of the indwelling Spirit, you will be unerringly guided, step by step, life by life, through universe upon universe, and age by age, until you finally stand in the presence of the paradise personality of the Universal Father.
What do you think?
Well, this shows us the greatest part of God is his goodness and love. And that is why he doesn't judge us himself. And our proof is that when someday we'll stand in his presence. But the indwelling gift of the Father is so comforting because he's with us every day anyway. So we don't even need to go to stand in his presence to be in his presence.
All right. Anyone else?
And I think one of the most difficult problems we face is that we are not always able to perceive the guidance of the thought adjuster. How can we figure out his voice or his sound? Because it says that it's not a conscious action, but we are trying to figure out what is that plan that our thought adjuster created for us. And it's a daily task to try to pay attention in what he's telling us, or how he's guiding us, or what decisions we can make that, well, we can figure out how to make our Father's will, but how to follow what the thought adjuster is trying to show us. I mean, to make it in the most perfect way, or most closest way to our thought adjuster's guidance.
Mm-hmm.
It's something that in many groups we discuss a lot, and I think nobody knows. I mean, all of us can imagine how, but we do not really know.
Yeah, I think the one thing we have to remember when answering that question, because we all have that question, we wish, how many times we said, wish God would send me an email so I would know, but that's where I think faith comes in a lot. We know that we have an indwelling spirit. We know the indwelling spirit is trying to talk to us. The book tells us that the communication from the thought adjuster is lost in the material, electrical, chemical functionings of our mind. It's kind of like, maybe dropping a note in a bottle and throwing it in the river, and sometimes it gets across the river and sometimes it gets swept downstream. But I think that's where the worshipful meditation comes into, as far as I'm concerned. It's, a lot of times when I do the prayer or the meditation thing, I remind myself, I don't mean this to sound blunt, but I tell myself, to shut up and listen. Instead of going on and on about prayer, it's like, take time to be quiet. And I don't believe in the clearing your mind type thing with worship, but, take time to just earnestly listen. And I don't think you're not going to hear the voices or that sort of thing, but just clear the pathway for that influence to come through. And then I think too on that, we've learned that God, people ask, well, what is God's will? And I think that's what we're after when we're trying to communicate with our thought adjuster. Well, what is God's will? And what does he want me to do? And I think the best description of God's will that I ever heard was that God's will is true, beautiful, and good. And if you look at whatever you're about to do or think or say, and ask yourself that question, is what I'm about to do true, beautiful, or good, then you can safely say that it's in tune with God's will. If it's not, then it's not, and you shouldn't do it. That's kind of always the yardstick I use for following God's will, and hopefully that's listening to my thought adjuster as well. Go ahead, Susan.
Flora, not to minimize the effect of meditation and listening, because it's an important part of this, but for me, and I started way too late in life, but for me, my attempt right now is, and for the past few years, is to build a relationship and an awareness of the presence of God. Mm-hmm. And for me, doing that means through everyday tasks and everyday activities and experiences, I'm trying to be mindful of God's presence in all of those everyday things. If I see a sunset that is beautiful, I invite God to enjoy that with me. I'm trying to establish that partnership, and that helps me to try to be more aware of God in all things. And honestly, I don't think I'm going to begin to hear a lot of communication until I do connect full time with God's Spirit, where I feel the presence. I'm, as Rick said, making those decisions, always being conscious of God. Is it true, beautiful, and good? That's a great thing to remember. And honestly, that's probably, the best way to start. But at the same time, if we ever really truly want to connect that quiet time of gratitude of anything beautiful, of sharing of anything that's important. I mean, just knowing that God is there is what I'm trying to do. And I think sometimes it gives me some peace because it reminds me, and it reminds me to be more mindful more often. So hopefully I'm building, and someday we'll establish that, but I've never heard God talk to me, but I do feel the peace when I sense the presence, and that comes upon me sometimes without me bidding it to happen. So now I think there's some things happening there where I feel that there's some connection happening more often than it did when I was younger anyway. That's just my technique.
Go ahead, Jeannie.
I love your beautiful experience, Susan, also Flor and Rick. I would like to share with you my experience with this guidance of what since 20 years ago I practice the worshipful communion. I reserve a part of my day, maybe half an hour, less or more, depending on the day. After my prayers and my gratitude, sometimes I cry because I feel so much love and remain in silence and just listening without expecting nothing, as the book says. But in my experience, the will of the Father normally represents the difficult path. The difficult task. Try to do something new that never did before, that I do not know how to do it. Well, I am here speaking English with you. I am citizen of a little country that speaks Spanish. Well, you know, what I have discovered, how it works in me, in myself, the guidance of the Father, is when I begin to do the difficult task, something amazing happens. I do not know how the ideas, abilities, I do things that I did not know that I was capable to do. And it's amazing. And I do things, and when I finish the task, I do it. It's because it's an experience amazing. I know that I had no ability to do it. If the Father was not helping me, I do not know how it happens. In my experience, when I am doing the task, when I am doing the difficult, the requires effort and time and sometimes pain, sadness with social experiences, etc. But that is my experience, and I am so grateful for being able to express something new, something different to me, new and different. Thank you.
I think that's a very good observation, Jeannie. And I think the book tells us that when we're in partnership with God, that it makes us more than we are. I don't remember the exact quote. I'm not good at pulling out exact quotes, but when we allow God to use us for His will, He makes us more than what we are. And I think that's exactly what you're sharing there, is that when you make yourself available, God can do great things with you. And this course is an example of Him using you to do great things. So,
thank you, Jeannie, for that. I appreciate it. Real briefly, I think the next quote coming up might be about the greatest manifestation of God is the thought gesture, but our greatest revelation of God is in the life and teachings of our Master Jesus Christ. So when we wonder, are we doing God's will or not, I often think, what did Jesus say or do from what we know in the Urantia Book in Part 4 that applies to that? And that's helpful. And another thing to realize is, in our local universe of Nebadon, the only personal presence of the Father is within Jesus Christ, Michael. our universe creator's son. And the thought adjuster is pre-personal, and we're persons, and we would like to communicate with another personality. And so we have that in Jesus, and we also have that in the Holy Spirit, the divine creative partner of Jesus. So those are both personalities. And the good thing is all of those spiritual influences always work as one. As far as listening to a voice, many people think that they want to listen to God or their thought adjuster as an audible voice, a male or female voice. That is not going to happen. If you heard a voice, it would have to be by lower beings adding that voice content, which could happen, but it'd be rare. God is the still small voice within our souls and minds. And as Jeannie said, when we do something that's new and difficult, and then we know it's God's will, we get peace and joy, and we get the conviction of truth. We know we're on the path of, as Rick said, on the path of truth, beauty, and goodness. So all that ties in. All right, that's all I wanted to share.
All right, thanks, Dave. That's an interesting observation that the thought adjuster is the pre-personal contact with the Father, and Jesus was a personal. I never thought of it that way, but that's interesting. Very interesting. All right, thanks. Okay, well, let's go to the next one then.
That's it. Well, I knew that would be the next one coming up. This is really powerful.
Would you like to read that one, Dave, please?
Yeah, sure. But the love of God is an intelligent and far-seeing parental affection. The divine love functions in unified association with divine wisdom and all other infinite characteristics of the perfect nature of the universal Father. God is love, but love is not God. The greatest manifestation of the divine love for mortal beings is observed in the bestowal of the thought adjusters. But your greatest revelation of the Father's love is seen in the bestowal life of his son, Michael, as he lived on earth the ideal spiritual life. It is the indwelling adjuster who individualizes the love of God to each human soul.
Go ahead, Dave, if you'd like to comment on that one further.
Yeah, okay. God is love, but love is not God. That confuses some people. God is a deity spirit personality, and love is a spirit value, the highest spirit value. And in the Urantia Book, they give us 6 spirit values. The highest 3 are from the Trinity on Paradise, would be love, mercy, and service ministry, similar to the love of the Father and the mercy of the Son and the ministry of the infinite Spirit. And down here, we realize the last 3 of those 6 spirit values mostly, and that's truth, beauty, and goodness. And then on the last part, the greatest manifestation and the greatest revelation, I covered that before. I put that in my own words, but basically it just says, I think, about the same as what I tried to share before. So that's all I have on it right now.
All right, very good. Anyone else?
I would like to talk more about the last sentence. It says, it is a indwelling adjuster who individualizes the love of God. How that happened? Individualized, which is does that mean that love is different in any person, or how can that be expressed? Individualizes.
Well,
I'm sorry, I can't hear Jeannie very well.
Well, it's Flora who's saying that. She's wanting to know about the last sentence. She's asking how the adjuster individualizes love of God for each human soul. And I think her question is God's love different for each individual because of that? Is that right, Flora? Is that what you're asking? Yeah, okay. So
okay.
I guess my response to that would be I don't think God's love is different for each individual, because we know that God loves everybody with unconditional love. And, we're told that there's only two types of people he recognizes: those who do his will and choose to do his will, and those who don't. So I think that the love of God is the same for each individual. But I think what this is telling us is that, I think early on in Jesus's ministry, the question was asked by one of the apostles about, does God love the Jews as a people, or does he love people as individuals? And Jesus was telling them that because the Jews thought that God loved the Jewish people, but Jesus was telling them that God loves you as an individual. And I think to me, that's what this is saying here, is that since each of us have our own personal thought adjuster, we have our own personal connection with God, and therefore he loves each of us as an individual and not as a race or a society or a culture. I think that would be my response to that one. Go ahead, Jeannie.
In my understanding, I think we can think the fact that God loves us as we were the only child he has in the universe. And also the gift of the total choicer is an individual gift. So I think this is part of this loving us as individually, each one of us. His gifts to everyone are personal according to their personality, to their unique characteristics. In my understanding, this is part of the meaning of your question.
All right, thanks, Jeannie.
I feel also that this last sentence is huge, because it shows that God, through the adjusters, make every effort to reach each person with their own experiences and their own receptivity and their own personality. And it's like that parable of the shepherd going after the sheep. I mean, it's not a one-size-fits-all love from God. It's exactly what we need by the expert adjuster, making sure every effort's made to make us understand that love. And it's a lifetime thing. So I think it's wonderful. It makes you feel so special and loved just to know that the adjuster tries so hard to portray that love to us from God individually.
Thanks.
I have another thought.
Sure.
We can think also in this. God is so great, so powerful. He lives there, far away in the paradise. If we do not have the total choicer in ourselves, knowing that we have the presence of his divine spark in ourselves, then we can feel God close, not far away, not, I don't know how to say, but I think this is also the meaning of individualized the love of God to each human soul. We have God within ourselves, aside of his presence in paradise, right?
All right, thanks, Jeannie. Okay, I think I just add, as far as Flora's question about the love of God being the same for each person, I think it says, the book tells us that God's love for us is based upon our ability to receive it. So our ability to receive God's love, the greater that is, the more love we receive, or something like that. Is that? Remember that?
The more
Yeah,
you
that's
can.
right.
Go ahead, Dave. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right, Rick. I agree with you, Rick, that God's love is universal and equal upon and the same upon all. But since we have different personalities, the adjuster then is combining our will with God's will to co-create a higher you and me as a soul. And so each soul is going to have a different interpretation of God's love. And until we're finally all spirit perfected in paradise, we won't know very much about God's love. So it's a growing process. And that's all beautiful, in my view.
Absolutely.
Also, the Spirit of Truth not only gives us the feeling of the presence of Michael, but also the presence of God in our lives and within. And that is a very healing thing, to know that that presence is with you. And we all know, we feel it, we know it. And people recognize it, even just passing you by day to day. There's something that shows when we feel that love and that presence. So.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks, Susan.
All right. Let's go on to the next one then. Jeannie, would you like to read one, or?
Yeah, I will try.
You do fine.
In God, the Father, free will performances are not ruled by power, nor are they guided by intellect alone. The divine personality is defined as consisting in spirit and manifesting himself to the universes as love. Therefore, in all his personal relations with the creature personalities of the universes, the first source and center is always and consistently a loving Father. God is a Father in the highest sense of the term. He is eternally motivated by the perfect idealism of divine love, and that tender nature finds its strongest expression and greatest satisfaction in loving and being loved.
So what do you think, Jeannie?
This is something that I have thinking a lot. Divine love and how it works. Sometimes when someone makes me feel bad or sad or hurts me, and I do not want to know nothing about him or her again, I do not want to see them. And I think when we are serving the Father and working for his wills, what would do God in my place?
Mm-hmm.
He will feel offended and abandon everyone, or he remains no matter what happens. And I think this is something that gives me the answer about the will of the Father. What I must do when someone acts do something wrong to me. It's my reflection about divine love.
All right. Very good. Anyone else?
Yeah, sometimes I talk to my father all the time. Wherever I am, he's always with me, and we have great conversations. And sometimes I ask him to be able to feel the love, but not in the way I know or I feel loved, but in the way he knows love, he feels love, because I would like to be able to experience love in the way he loves. Mm. I don't know if I am expressing. And sometimes I tell him, please let me love in the way you love. I don't understand how you love. not from the human point of view or feeling, but in the way he feels. He loves. It's sometimes difficult to express it because it's too big, the concept of the differentiation between both. And even the Revelator said that what we know as love has nothing to do with the way the Father loves. Just a desire.
All right. Thank you, Flora.
I think the love of God is not just as we express love. It is not just an emotion. It is an attitude, unconditional devotion. Divine love to me is continuous serving no matter what happens.
All right. Well, if I could kind of follow up on what Flo was saying there too, I think, learning how to love other people with the same love that God has, I think it's important for us to always remember too that we need to learn to love ourselves that way, that to realize that we are a child of God and to love ourselves, because oftentimes we're pretty hard on ourselves. So I think it's important for us to learn to love ourselves because God loves us too. So I think the last comment I would have on this is the last sentence there. It says, he, meaning God himself, is eternally motivated by the perfect idealism of divine love, and that tender nature finds its strongest expression in the greatest satisfaction in loving and being loved. And a lot of times, people ask, well, what's the purpose of life? What's my purpose? And what's the purpose of everything? And this, to me, is the ultimate answer to that question, is that the purpose of all of us and of everything that God has created is this, that God wants to love and wants to be loved. And that's the expression I use to answer that question when someone asks, what's the purpose of everything?
Good. Thanks.
Okay. Go ahead, Susan.
This particular quote reminds me of the Conductors of Worship section, where God is, when we finally stand in the presence of God and worship, and there is a time when God signals that he is full of the worship and love and adoration of all of us, that is such a beautiful thing to think that we can actually give back to God. And it reminds me of, I don't know if all of you are parents or not, but when you're a parent and you've given all this care and love to a child when they're a baby, and when you finally hear the baby say mama or daddy, or you get that first real hug around the neck where you're not just hugging them, but they're hanging on to you, and that willingness and that attention that they give back means everything. I think that's the way God feels, the way the Father feels when we reach out, like you said, Flor, to say, show me how to love. In God's eyes, he's created you as a perfect child. And when you reach out back to him like that, that is the greatest satisfaction I think he can feel, is that we are willing to share that love with him. I think it's beautiful.
All right. Thank you. This is some really good discussion we've got going on here.
Yes.
All right. Well, let's I get my cursor to come back there. We'll go with the next one. Flor, would you like to read one, or?
Okay, I have to leave soon, but yes.
Okay.
The architecture, lighting, and heating, as well as the biologic and artistic embellishment of Abona spheres, are quite beyond the greatest possible stretch of human imagination. You cannot be told much about Habona. To understand its beauty and grandeur, you must see it. But there are real rivers, lakes, on these perfect worlds. Well, this is a kind of trying to imagine love's God. I mean, we have, from our perspective, we can imagine rivers and lakes, but whatever is there is totally different from our point of view.
Yeah.
So the revelators are right. We must see it in order to understand and perceive the grandeur and beauty of those places. It's out of our imagination.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I would like to see it, but maybe we see it, maybe we do not understand it. We need to live out the process in order to understand that. And it says in the book, if we were there suddenly, we could see nothing because we are not able. Our ability to perceive does not exist. We can't.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, and I read this.
I'm waiting for that moment.
Yeah. I read this sentence and it fascinates me because, you know, I've been fortunate to do some traveling. I've been down to Machu Picchu and, you know, and I've seen the Mediterranean Ocean in Spain and, you know, the Grand Canyon and things like that. And, you know, some beautiful buildings and just how beautiful things are here. And then to be told that the beauty there is beyond anything we can even imagine. I mean, I can't even, I guess that's the point of the sentence. I can't even imagine what it would be like. So must be something very special.
It's something wonderful to look forward to, for sure.
Absolutely.
When we know we've experienced such beauty here, but it's way beyond that, it's pretty inspiring.
Okay, I need to leave. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Flor.
To see you, Jenny. Thank you so much. Dave, nice to see you here. Thank you.
God bless you.
See you next one.
See you. I have a comment, a little comment. Something
Sure.
that every time I read this quote, I think, there are real rivers and lakes, but rivers and lakes of what? I do not think they have water like we know. I think it's something different. Maybe it's a kind of water, but I do not think in these words. Do you think they have stones and earth like ourselves here in this planet or not? What do you think?
I believe so. I believe that the other planets and worlds are, you know, we're told that they have other materials and that you know, like their periodic table of elements, I think is like twice as big as what we have. So there are certainly other elements, but in the physical realms, you know, the planets and suns and all that are made up of pretty much the same thing. But I would think those would be similar too, I guess. Dave or Alfonso, what do you guys think?
Yeah, it states that if we were to go up even to a mansion world in our local universe with the physical equipment we have, we would hear or see nothing. It's a higher reality. Soul is a higher reality than physical. And here, Avona is 1 billion ultimate dash absolute reality, all perfected, eternally perfected. And obviously, if we were there, we'd be, or up in paradise, we wouldn't be able to detect anything. So I really don't know. The question I have is, on Havona, are there physical beings or not? I don't recall that. Now, up in the mansion world, there are physical beings and animals and so on. And so for those animals, they would have those lower 100 elements, and they'd have, I assume, real water, real lakes, and so on. And we'd be in soul form. We'd be able to detect the lower, everything lower we can still detect, they state, and that's wonderful. So we could detect physical water, and if there's Urantia water up there, whatever that is, we'll be able to detect that too. But if there's spiritual water, we won't be able to detect it in soul form until we're up in the spirit level. So I really don't know.
That's a great question, though, isn't it?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I was under the impression that they had our elements and other elements in addition.
In addition, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they do in the mansion world, in Urantia level, and Nabaton
Yeah.
they do. Up on Havona, I don't know. I'll have to check that out, see if I can find some quote later.
Yeah.
I don't recall anything physical on Havona, but maybe I skipped over that.
But isn't it the center of all material reality? I mean, isn't it the gravity that holds together the actual material universe? So I think I'm under the impression that it's real, but I'm not sure what elements it's made up of. So I'm gonna look back at Paradise and Havona.
Yeah, that's good. Now, there's two types of gravity. There's Paradise elliptical gravity, and then there's local linear gravity. Now with Havona, that's in between. There's sort of a bridge between the local universe, time-space realities, and the paradisical, timeless, spaceless. So that Havona is transcendental, where you're starting to not be bound too much by space and time. So,
Dave, I just found it on page 154 of the Central and Divine Universe. It's in section 2. It says the Constitution of Havona. Spirit beings do not dwell in nebulous space. They do not inhabit ethereal worlds. They are domiciled on actual spheres of a material nature.
Material nature. But why does it say if we were up on any higher level, we'd be totally invisible to our senses?
Mm-hmm.
I don't understand that, see.
It's difficult to understand, but it seems there is a material reality that we have not the capacity to see it. Our eyes are not capable to see it.
Maybe it's talking about the spiritual realities on those worlds we're not able to see.
It does say that the creation of the central universe is threefold. The local universe is twofold, but it does say the material of Havona consists of the organization of exactly 1,000 basic chemical elements and a function of 7 forms of Havona energy. So even the Havona natives respond to just certain ones. I think it just depends on what level of creature you are at any given time, what you're experiencing. If we were mortal, we would experience the material. If we were Urantia, we would experience probably the material and maybe the mid phase of the elements. But obviously, we'd have to be spiritual to sense those spiritual energies and materials.
Go ahead and read that paragraph there.
Okay, further down on the page it says, none of the physical beings of the central universe would be visible to Urantians. Neither would any of the physical stimuli of those faraway worlds excite a reaction in your gross sense organs. If a Urantia mortal could be transported to Havona, he would be deaf, blind, and utterly lacking in all other sense reactions. He could only function as a limited, self-conscious being deprived of all environmental stimuli and all reactions thereto. That's because we're material.
But I'll add briefly, there's one other way to look at it. Here on Urantia in time and space, our physical eyes can only see 1 octave of 100 octaves of the electromagnetic spectrum. So we're 99% blind to all, and that's all physical energy. If we had eyes equipped, we should be able to see, instead of 7 basic colors, we should be able to see 700 basic colors. So maybe up there, they're seeing all these higher energies that we can't see down here. That's another possibility to think about. I don't know if that's correct or not.
Well, I agree with that too, Dave, because it talks about in the ages of light and life, I don't know how it speaks of it, but it's basically
a range of human
range of vision is adjusted, right? And And we even know that animals, like dogs, can hear things that we can't hear. They have an extended range of hearing, evidently, and maybe sight is the same way. Because it does say that
dogs hear better than we do, and they smell thousands of times better than we do. But
right,
they see in black and white, and they don't see color.
Right,
but
and
most birds see in color. That's interesting.
But you can hear a dog. You can blow a dog whistle, and you can't even hear it, but they can hear it. And
yeah, their range goes to probably about twice the higher frequency as what we do. But there's still only about 1.5% of the whole electromagnetic spectrum that they can't detect either. Because you're getting into super high frequencies when you get way up there.
So is sight the same way? Is sight also a frequency as well as hearing?
I'm sorry, what's that?
Is sight considered to be a frequency like hearing is?
Yeah, it's electromagnetic reception, and sight's electromagnetic reception also. Sight's up in the higher frequency, and hearing is down in the lower. Hearing is from about 16 cycles to 20,000 cycles per second, and seeing is way, way up there compared to hearing.
That's very interesting.
And then radio waves and TV waves way higher, and then cosmic energy is way up there, and that's as high as we know about, probably. But from what it says about these 100 octaves, I guess there's super higher frequencies and energies that we haven't detected beyond even cosmic energy, cosmic rays, maybe.
Well, I think that's what some of our satellites do, like our ultraviolets and some of our planet hunting satellites. They take those things we can't see, those ranges we can't see, and convert them to a range we can see. So.
That's wonderful. Pretty soon we're going to have, I think, a Webb space telescope that's going to be far more powerful than the Hubble, and that should bring out more correlation with what the Urantia Book states on cosmology.
Yeah,
that's coming up in just a few more years. They should have that launched.
Yeah. And I'm looking forward to that day, because when they turn that thing on, I want to see their minds just totally blown by what they see. So,
well, what's amazing now is they've discovered there's billions of galaxies. A galaxy is apparently the size of a super universe, and there's billions of them. And in the Revelation, they only go up to, I think, 28,000 galaxies. And so it says that when we get better space instruments, we'll see it much bigger. It states that God has potential, or actually could have an infinite-sized universe if he wanted that.
Yeah. All right, well, let's move on to the next one here. Would you like to read that one?
Sure. The universal economy is based on intake and output. Throughout the eternal career, you will never encounter monotony of inaction or stagnation of personality. Progress is made possible by inherent motion. Advancement grows out of the divine capacity for action, and achievement is the child of imaginative adventure. But inherent in this capacity for achievement is the responsibility of ethics, the necessity for recognizing that the world and the universe are filled with a multitude of differing types of beings. All of this magnificent creation, including yourself, was not made just for you. This is not an egocentric universe. The gods have decreed it is more blessed to give than to receive. And said your master son, he who would be greatest among you, let him be server of all.
What's your thoughts on that last sentence there? Go ahead, Jeannie.
I have studied this sentence and another sentence very similar, but it's slightly different. He who would be the greatest in the kingdom, let him be the server of all, or something like that. I don't know if you remember exactly the sentence, has great meaning to me. The greatest among you, in my opinion, refers to the local group, and the greatest in the kingdom is a spiritual fraternity, those who have been born of the Spirit. In my understanding of minister to all includes teach the divine truth, living the divine truth, serving to all, produce the fruit of the Spirit, and includes to guide others into the kingdom. That is to be a minister. It's a great task.
All right, thanks, Jeannie. Well, we got about 20 more to go through, but don't let that, we'll try to get through them, but I don't want to let that inhibit our discussion here. But so we'll go on to the next one. Okay.
You could consider doing part 3, maybe.
Yeah, we may have to do that, huh? Okay. Dave, would you like to read this one, maybe?
Who, did you say me?
Yeah, if you would. If you want to.
Okay. Yeah, my phone doesn't have very loud volume here. I got the volume up to maximum, but maybe my hearing's going. Everybody seems to be talking pretty softly. Okay,
we'll speak a little louder.
41.5. Urantia is comparatively isolated on the outskirts of Satania, your solar system, with one exception, being the furthest removed from Jerusalem, while Satania itself is next to the outermost system of Urantia deck. This constellation is now traversing the outer fringe of Nebuchadnezzar. You were truly among the least of all creation until Michael's bestowal elevated your planet to a position of honor and great universe interest. Sometimes the last is first, while truly the least becomes greatest. Wow. The least becomes greatest. And then it says, page 409 in your Urantia Book, do you realize the significance that a division of archangels is now resident on your planet? This portends to great future events here on Urantia. And there's so many other ones throughout the book where we started out. Jesus had a choice of over 3.8 million human-inhabited planets in Nebuchadnezzar. He chose Urantia was probably the worst of the next to the worst in backwardness and chaos and tribulation. So we're very fortunate that we're born on this special planet where Jesus Christ Michael won unconditional sovereignty in his local universe.
That's for sure. And I think sometimes with all the chaos that we see on the internet and evening news, we forget our place here sometimes.
Yes.
And how fortunate it's, it was kind of like we studied in some of the previous class about the greatest of all. It's easy to overlook the good things that come from bad things. All right. Okay, let's go on to the next one then. Who hasn't read lately? I've lost track.
Alfonso has not had a chance to read.
Alfonso, or would you like to read, or do you have a comment? Not sure that. We'll catch up with Alfonso here before we get done. All right, even as mortals, so have these angels been father to many disappointments. And they will point out that sometimes your most disappointing disappointments have become your greatest blessings. Geez, we just talked about that very thing. Sometimes the planting of a seed necessitates its death, the death of your fondest hopes, before it can be reborn to bear the fruits of a new life and new opportunity. And from them you will learn to suffer less through sorrow and disappointment. First, by making fewer personal plans concerning other personalities, and then by accepting your lot when you have faithfully performed your duty. I think that's telling us not to get too down on ourselves, or not to be too disappointed when we do go through struggles in life, or we do have, like we were talking about there at the Wisconsin conference, about when you have a family crisis, don't let it be destructive, or don't let it bring you down, because something good usually comes from something bad, I guess. Any other comment you got? Go ahead, Susan.
This sentence where it says, and from them you will learn to suffer less through sorrow and disappointment first by making fewer personal plans concerning other personalities. That, I think, is really huge, not to have such high expectations for everyone that they disappoint you. I mean, to give the love and understanding and patience that they need, to care enough for them as a parent should care, that you're not always stumbling over other people's actions. I think that's one of the greatest things we can do for people, is to be helpful, but not to expect more than they can give at any given time.
Can you hear me there?
Yesterday I read Jesus talked to Nathaniel. I forget the exact words, but Jesus counseled Nathaniel. Nathaniel was quite intelligent. He was exacting, and Jesus told him to lessen your I can't remember the words.
Expectations, or
lessen your hopes for sharing with another person, because they can't comprehend it all. And so if you lessen your expectations, you'll have less disappointments. Something like that.
Yeah.
I forget the exact words.
Alfonso wants to speak. Alfonso?
Hello?
Hello?
Yes, go ahead. Good to see you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, Alfonso,
Yes.
we're thrilled you're here, buddy.
I was wondering, because I've been trying to say something, and nobody answered me. Yes.
Oh. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, this is nothing else that I'm actually going through. Like the most disappointments, have become the greatest blessings. And I was going to say something when you mentioned the book of the shock. And I just want to go back to that, because I wanted to say something about that is related to this chapter. It says, I started reading the book, and I went through until I arrived to that passage when they were saying about who you're gonna forgive. The son, one of the son did something wrong, and the other one was good, and I stopped. I could not read them anymore, because I didn't know what to say. I don't know what to do. And then I forgot about the book, because that question, it was very, very powerful for me, very heavy. And then I said, no, I'm not ready. I'm not prepared to answer that question. And now that I finally, I think I reached that point where I was mature enough to answer that. I can see that right now what this particular chapter is saying, that is that we got to let go. We got to we cannot be overcome by the disappointments. You might don't like what you see, apparently, but you have to have faith, and that whatever is wrong that is happening at this moment will turn an opportunity to do something better later on.
Yeah, right.
I'm just like I said, every time I'm trying to advance in my spiritual, on growing spiritually, to understand more, to accept life like it is, and like they saying, making fewer personal plans, and accept, what is there, and keep going, keep up with the faith, And
Right.
that's all I have to say by now. And thank you for allowing me to be here with y'all.
Oh, thank you for being here. I didn't know you were trying to speak earlier. You were muted, and I didn't realize that. Go ahead, Jeannie.
So just a little comment. I observed that the Revelator is talking about making fewer personal plans, not group or social plans. That I think is different from our social group plans, group work.
All right. Well, I think it's interesting here that says our most disappointing disappointments have become our greatest blessings. I think we need to remind ourselves probably of that each morning. So, okay. Alfonso, are you able to see the screen? Would you like to read this one?
Yes. The greatest affliction of the cosmos is never to have been afflicted. Mortals only learn wisdom by experience tribulation, and that's true. You know, you have to have that fall. You know, in order for you to learn how to get to stand up again. Tribulation. That's the only way. You know, that's to reach some kind of wisdom in your life. You know, within yourself too. And nothing up there, you know, like they say, the greatest affliction of the cosmos never been afflicted. So us as mortals have to go through that process by learning from experience, you know, right or wrong, false and right. And that's very, you know, amazing that that is very true, you know, that we're not going to reach any wisdom unless we learn how to overcome tribulations, you know, and falls. And that's something I experienced myself, you know. So that's what I have to say.
Okay. Yeah, I think we've all been there right with you on that one for sure. So I know in our last class, we talked a little bit about this too, how Jesus put the apostles through this very sort of thing that, you know, their hopes would reach a high point and then he would dash their hopes, and then they'd get built up and then they would have their hopes dashed again, you know, and all these different things they had to go through was just training for, you know, how to accomplish things. And, you know, I think this is what this is saying, that we have to go through these tribulations and afflictions and in order to become better people and stronger people. Go ahead, Susan.
One thing I think also too is I believe that it's not just learning by one experience, any lesson. I think that we are probably given several lessons of the same type so that we can build up a dependability of response that the universe can count on basically in the future.
Right.
Okay, we've been through this enough times. We've solved the same problem, you know, reliably every single time, and to the point where they know, okay, this person has got this lesson down. And then I think maybe we won't receive so many challenges maybe in that area. And when I read or listened to Alfonso read this, the greatest affliction is never to have been afflicted. How many times have we all said, oh, this has been a bad day? And we all have them. But, you know, almost this particular quote makes it almost wrong to say you've had a bad day. What you've had is a challenging day and hopefully a victory. That's the way I like to look at this thing.
That's certainly a great way to look at it. You think that,
Yeah.
does that make us more reliable to God too?
That's what I think. I think, and Jesus talked to John Mark on the mountain on that Wednesday before he died. Remember when he said, you know, certain things would tell Jesus that John would be dependable in his faith in the future. because he'd been through certain experiences, and I think that's part of how God and the universe looks at us too. We've been through certain experiences enough times that they can predict or count on us to respond in the positive way they need us to. Because I believe we'll be in leadership roles at some time after we leave, you know, as finalitors. So they need to be able to count on us to do the right thing.
And here too, yeah.
Right, right.
Go ahead, Jeannie.
Thank you, Rick. I would like to add something that I do not remember where in the Urantia Book is, but in the Urantia Book, the Revelators and Jesus presents two sources of wisdom. One is the human experience in tribulation, and another source is divine. We receive spiritual discernment, divine values, divine energies in our transformation, our spiritual transformation, and we receive wisdom, divine wisdom. It's a superior capacity. First, we learn wisdom by experiencing tribulation. When you are born of the Spirit, we have access to divine wisdom. And so I think in this quote, the Revelator is presenting the mortal or human level of wisdom. Yes, just my comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeannie. All right, I'll go ahead, Susan.
Jeannie, I think you're so right about that. And remember, Jesus told us that if we ever have problems speaking and we need the words and they don't come, ask him, and you know the Spirit of Truth will provide that. That's exactly, and it's a promise. It's not just what we think. He promised that, so it's very true.
Yeah, it's true.
Didn't he tell like the apostles to go out and not to worry about what they were saying because that the words would be provided?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Okay.
If we can't master our minds, we can freely ask for the mind of our master.
Right.
There you go. All right.
I will take a turn reading,
Sure, go
if
ahead.
that's okay.
I've lost track.
Okay. Marriage is the mother of all human institutions, for it leads directly to home founding and home maintenance, which is the structural basis of society. The family is vitally linked to the mechanism of self-maintenance. It is the sole hope of race perpetuation under the mores of civilization, while at the same time, it most effectively provides certain highly satisfactory forms of self-gratification. The family is man's greatest purely human achievement, combining as it does the evolution of the biologic relations of male and female with the social relations of husband and wife. I think that's amazing that it says the family is man's greatest purely human achievement. So it's obvious that we need to focus on family building and family welfare and health for our future. And we start with the children, obviously, teaching them a solid family values.
Yep.
Real briefly, on page 966 in the Urantia Book, in the center of the page, there's only one word in italics. That's home. It states that society, to evolve, needs to be home-based, also for our spirituality. It's up and down whether or not churches will survive, but it states that the home should be the basis for the spiritual training of our children and the family. And what I see coming up is when we were told to form thousands and thousands of study groups, I think that should be more based on the home and our family. And then once you have a father and a mother and children, and they do their education and training and study the Bible or the Urantia Book or whatever, then they'll invite some of their friends over, and they'll form a small group of 10 to 15 people. And then when they get up to maybe about 15 people, that's a little bit crowded, they'll split off into maybe 2 or 3 different other home groups and continue that way. And that is happening now worldwide. A lot of people don't know this, but in the oppressive countries like in Iran, where they would murder any non-Islamic, if you're a Christian there and they found out you're a Christian, you'd be killed. They have millions of Christians now who are studying in their home quietly, and the government doesn't know about it. And this will transform eventually these tyrannical countries into
dead on, because we have a personal friend and a family in Pakistan who's going through that very thing. The Urantia book was introduced to one of the ladies over there, and a fatwa, or a death sentence, was passed upon them. But fortunately, they had the money to move to the United States. And they said they probably wouldn't have, except they had a child. So they left Pakistan because they were going to be murdered. And then another fellow who was leading a Urantia study group over there, they actually had to have, they couldn't have men and women in the same group at the same time. And they couldn't have too many people at one time because the neighbors would rat on them and, you know, tell the mullahs or whoever in charge over there. So they actually, the husband was actually beat up and held at gunpoint on the ground. And their house was set on fire. Their home was destroyed by they opened the dam above their home, above the Christian community, and flooded the whole community, and everybody lost everything. They lost totally everything and just escaped with their lives. And so, you know, what you're saying about that is exactly what's happening in the world. They're trying to have study group over there, and several of us have been helping them, but it's difficult for them. You know, we talk about having study group here, but over there, it's like you're saying, it's a life and death. Just having study group can be a life or death thing.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
One last thing. This is paper 84, the third paper on marriage and family and home. And it's very interesting and I think very important. The very last sentence, very last paragraph, and very last sentence of paper 84 is a dire warning by the chief of seraphim of all angels here. And this chief of seraphim, if you look it up, is a paradise level primary supernatum, resident now in Urantia, in charge of all the seraphim angels. And she is the one that gave us these three papers on home, family, and marriage. And then there's two other papers she gave on angels. All very interesting. But this, the basis of a normal home is the foundation of society. And in that last paragraph, if we do not maintain this normal home, society will collapse.
Yeah. Yeah.
Very serious. But we have these high agents here, so I'm optimistic that somehow they'll figure some way to cause this progress for the home and family to get stronger and stronger.
Yeah, I think that's something that the Urantia community, the organization and stuff, should focus on, is helping with this family concept of family and strengthening families. So
I totally agree. But it's lukewarm interest in there right now.
yeah.
I think it's good if we could write 2 or 3 levels of children's edition of the Urantia book. I think somebody's done 1 or 2. There should be more of that too.
Yeah, we definitely need that. We've collected 2 or 3 of those, and they're okay, but we really need a serious effort at that to make some kind of children's stories from the Urantia book. So
yeah, for maybe, you know, a child 5 and a child maybe 12 and a child maybe 16 or something. I don't know, 3 levels would be real good if we could do it on a very thorough basis.
right. And that, you know, I think that's one of the parental responsibilities. A lot of times people today say, well, you know, I don't want to teach my child, or I don't want to influence my child. I don't want to, you know, influence them with what I believe. But I think that's wrong. I think that's what parents are supposed to do. We're supposed to teach our children.
I agree. Parents should do that.
Yeah.
If we don't, every generation just starting from scratch without wisdom from the past.
Yeah. And if we don't, somebody else will.
Right.
Yeah. All right. Jeannie, would you like to do this one?
Man's greatest spiritual jeopardy consists in partial progress, the predicament of unfinished growth, forsaking the evolutionary religions of fear without immediately grasping the revelatory religion of love. Modern science, particularly psychology, has weakened only those religions which are so largely dependent upon fear, superstition, and emotion.
I feel like when I read this that we are in a position right now where we're trying to teach people not to fear God, not to have faith without fear. But at the same time, we have an incomplete saturation of the revelation of the reasons why people would choose to live the will of God. We haven't provided the lure of truth fully. So I think what we're experiencing in society right now is the lack of restraint that fear used to help maintain without fully getting through with the revelation, the love of God, and the willingness to do his will with righteousness, goodness, truth. So I think that's our problem. People are abandoning faith because they're not afraid, and yet they're sort of stuck in the middle. They haven't found the true living faith that we want them to have. So I think that quote about what the world needs most is to know Jesus, to know the religious life that he lived, to really know him and love him, is like the huge thing that we can do to bring those people on board that are stuck in the middle.
So people are forsaking the evolutionary religions of fear, but they haven't yet grasped the religion of love yet.
They haven't got on board, yeah. So they don't feel like they need it.
But not a large percentage. I've been doing this work now 42 years, and I'm roughly estimating that in the United States, among all adults, probably 5 times more adults are seeking higher spiritual reality. They're giving up on saying everything in the Bible is true, and they're more eclectic, and they pick and choose, and hopefully they'll choose the red letter words of Jesus as the highest authority in the Christian Bible. So I do see progress over the last 3 or 4 decades.
Good. All right. Well, let's go on to the next one. So we've got about 15 minutes left here, but we'll get through as many as we can here. Dave, would you like to read this one?
You say Dave? I couldn't hear you.
Oh, yeah, Dave, would you like to read this one?
Yeah, 101.9.3. True religion is that sublime and profound conviction within the soul which compellingly admonishes man that it would be wrong for him not to believe in these morantial realities, which constitute his highest ethical and moral concepts, his highest interpretation of life's greatest values, and the universe's deepest realities. And such a religion is simply the experience of yielding intellectual loyalty to the highest dictates of spiritual consciousness. There's our goal. Our desire should be for greater personal God consciousness at all times and in all places. And I need to work more on that, and I think we all do. And
we all do, yeah.
So you seek a little bit, and suddenly, usually, great things are revealed. I've had that experience, and it's very, very powerful and transforming when that happens.
All right, thank you.
I'd like to ask you something, Dave. When you said before that you had seen great progress in the last 4 decades, the older people seeking out truth.
Not older, all people, young people too. I think the young people are more aware in a sense than they were 30, 40 years ago. Go ahead.
Okay. You believe that they are searching for something more from your research?
Yeah, well, from my experience, I've been trying to share the gospel of Jesus and gems of truth from the Urantia Book for over 40 years. I think people are now, they're more frustrated with evolutionary religion. You can see that in Europe and in the United States. Many churches in Western Europe are closing. That's been going on increasingly fast for the last 2 decades or so. And they're giving up on this idea of ecclesiastical authority. And that's good because the Urantia Book says there should be no ecclesiastical authority. God and man, each human being is directly connected to our Father God in many ways. So I'm optimistic. But this is a turbulent time. And that's exactly why the Urantia Book came in to guide us through these drastic changes. It does state we are in a spiritual springtime. And hopefully, maybe in 10, 20 years, I'm roughly guessing, we might have, with possible spiritual visitors to the planet, maybe, we could go into a higher spiritual summertime.
Yeah, I just read the other day the quote that says that Urantia is quivering on the brink of a spiritual reawakening. Yeah, so Dave, we can only hope that you're right about that, and we pray for that every day for sure.
2030 AD is a time of another dispensational. AD 30 was when Jesus gave the complete resurrection from of surviving humans from Adam and Eve time up to AD 30. And 1030, Melchizedek came, preparing for maybe for the Urantia Book. And 2030 should be some interesting time, maybe.
Let's hope.
We'll see.
All right.
I don't know if I'll be 91 years old, so I don't know if I'll be around or not.
We'll be looking on with interest, if not from the mansion worlds, right, Dave?
Right, exactly.
Yeah,
my dad lived to be 91, so I've got a slight chance of doing that.
Oh, yeah.
My mother lived to be 87.
Okay. All right, we got just 10 minutes left, and I have, I think, 13 left of these, so we'll go through these a little quicker if you don't mind. But don't hesitate to comment either. So that's what this is all about, is everybody commenting on these. But so I'll read this one since it's so long. The God-knowing individual is not one who is blind to the difficulties or unmindful of the obstacles which stand in the way of finding God in the maze of superstition, tradition, and materialistic tendencies of modern times. He has encountered all these deterrents and triumphed over them, surmounted them by living faith, and attained the highlands of spiritual experience in spite of them. But it is true that many who are inwardly sure about God fear to assert their feelings of certainty because of the multiplicity and cleverness of those who assemble objections and magnify difficulties about believing in God. It requires no great depth of intellect to pick flaws, ask questions, or raise objections, but it does require brilliance of mind to answer these questions and to solve these difficulties. Faith certainty is the greatest technique for dealing with all such superficial contentions. I certainly think we've all been in that situation where we brought up the idea of God or talked about Jesus or spirituality and religion, and somebody just like, well, what about this or what about that? And it's difficult when they're bringing up, maybe childish or vague questions to, answer those. But I think that's the value of, like what Dave was talking about earlier with study groups too, is in classes like this, it helps us to prepare for those questions because we get to, in a friendly environment here, practice those responses. And certainly in study group too, I think that's an important thing. A function of study group is to help us learn how to answer those difficult questions with these people who do pick flaws and ask questions and raise objections so that we're ready when we're faced with that situation.
Can I say something?
Sure, Alfonso, go ahead.
It's a situation like that. I have found those situations even within the Urantia community. You know, when I have gone to conferences, I encounter, brothers that they read the Urantia book, they study the Urantia book, and when we start talking and exchanging ideas, they fail to answer some some questions, and then I'm very happy, and I'm very glad that I can provide them with answers, and I it amazes me like that I have the capacity to answer those questions, and
Yeah.
and it is great, it's great that something, that at this level, is still happening, because I had my bout with the people that on the street that comes and knock on my door, and they want to either to gain me over to his group, by putting fears, like
Right.
what's happening in the world and what's happening here and there, and I go, no, just what about the good things that happened in your life? Why don't you tell me about your experience with God? Tell me
Yeah.
yours. I don't want you to quote me anything from any book. Just tell me how much love and care, God has provided to you, and so that's the way I feel very confident, and that I keep on with this, with my faith and my spirituality growing. And like I said, I have found that even within the Urantia community, that, and I'm very happy to be there for them when they ask me a question or they have doubts about something, and I can provide it with an answer. That's all I have to say.
Well, Alfonso, that's what we talk about when we say training teachers and leaders, and obviously we've done that, or you've done that. You are obviously a teacher and a leader by being able to answer those questions for people. And when people like that come knocking on your door, turn that situation around and say, "Sure, come on in." We'll teach you a thing or two. So,
It feels very, very a happiness, a very joy when someone after the class or the meeting has finished, come to you and say, Alfonso, I want to thank you for what you said in the class. It really helped me. And that's I mean, that kind of joy, that experience, is what keep me going. That's
sure.
the joy in life. That someone comes to you and say, hey, what you said is true. And help me. So I like that.
Yeah.
And Alfonso, it seems as though each of us, being so unique with personality, has our own individual perspective on anything in the book. And it's really important for everyone to engage at times like that and offer their opinions. That's why study group is so important, because you might read the book yourself and understand it your own way, but then when you're around others, they have a different way of seeing it, and possibly a better way. And for you to share like that, for everyone to share, raises the group's understanding. So it's a great service you're doing by offering your own input instead of standing by quietly, because many times people do. They stand back and don't participate. So it's
And one thing that I repeat over and over is the ability to speak, because I was afraid to talk. I was afraid to not to be understand because of my my background, as a Spanish speaking person. And then I'm amazed, but that words comes out of my mouth, words that I hardly ever use, and I said, Jesus, this is a miracle, because I'm talking to others, and something that it came out of me, that reading the Urantia book bring me, because I was expecting to find a Spanish-speaking person that will be involved in a study group, but so far, after 15 years, I haven't found anybody. So I had to force myself to go to learn English and talk English and share my ideas in English. So it was a triumph for me, doing this.
So
That's great. Proves you're dedicated. I did the same thing. I tried to share the more advanced truths of the Urantia Book with very little success. And most people looked at me like I was from outer space or something. So then out of frustration, I said, I'm going to read the Bible through twice. I pick out all the highlights that correspond with the Urantia Book. And so when I talk with Christians, I use Bible quotes, and that works very well.
Yeah, I do the same.
That was frustrating when I have to read the Bible through twice.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm glad I did it.
Well, I do the same thing. It helps to appeal to them with their familiar knowledge. And I think the Urantia Book did that very same thing. It tells us that they chose 1,000 of the noblest concepts in the history of the planet just to give us a familiar base to start with before they started adding on the revelation. So it does comfort people when you're approaching them with some familiar knowledge that they accept with authority. And if you can parallel that to the Urantia Book truths, it's much easier for them to give it some open-minded thought anyway.
Yeah. Start where they are and then work from there. Yeah.
Right.
Okay. Let me see how much time it got left here. Oh my gosh, we're right almost 2 o'clock. Let me just read through these. I'd like to get through them and at least have them as food for thought for everyone. So I'll just read through them, and we're going to be a little late here, I guess, getting out. But if you've got a comment real quick, then we'll do that. So just stop me if you do have a comment. Excuse me. The man is not saved or ennobled by pressure. Spirit growth springs from within the evolving soul. Pressure may deform the personality, but it never stimulates growth. Even educational pressure is only negatively helpful in that it may aid in the prevention of disastrous experiences. Spiritual growth is greatest where all external pressures are at a minimum. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom. Man develops best when pressures of home, community, church, or state are the least. But this must not be construed as meaning that there is no place in a progressive society for home, social institutions, church, or state. And the one thing I'm reminded of with this quote is that it's hard for someone to think spiritually when they're hungry. And so a lot of times we have to meet the physical needs of someone before we can reach them spiritually.
Yes.
Excuse me just a second.
If you'd like me to read, I
Yeah,
can.
go ahead.
The local universe is the starting place for those personalities who are farthest from God and who can therefore experience the greatest degree of spiritual ascent in the universe, can achieve the maximum of experiential participation in the co-creation of themselves. These same local universes likewise provide the greatest possible depth of experience for the descending personalities, who thereby achieve something which is to them just as meaningful as the paradise ascent is to an evolving creature.
Yeah, I think that's interesting because their journey from spiritual to our level is just as important to them as our journey from mortal to spiritual.
Yes. God has no respect of persons. I think everybody will be the happiest whether they're ascending, descending, or stationary sons of God. They'll be the happiest that way, I believe.
All right. Men all too often forget that God is the greatest experience in human existence. Greatest experience in human existence. Other experiences are limited in their nature and content, but the experience of God has no limits save those of the creature's comprehension capacity. And this very experience is in itself capacity enlarging. When men search for God, they are searching for everything. When they find God, they have found everything. The search for God is the unstinted bestowal of love attended by amazing discoveries of new and greater love to be bestowed. And I think that reflects back to what Alfonso was saying there, that, you know, through the years and through practice and through, you know, his study, his comprehension capacity has expanded. And, you know, that's the greatest experience we can have, is to have that experience.
It requires patience and understanding and acceptance, and constantly accept the reality, you know, of what is life. And for me, like I told you before, I was trying to form a Spanish-speaking study group, but I failed. You know, it was a very disappointment for me not to be able to form a group. But you know, I understood that it was for something else that I'm preparing for. You know, not maybe a study group and Espanol. It'll come later, but for now I have to get what I got, you know, and work with it, you know.
Right.
Yeah. Let's accept.
Well, you can share online. There are many groups online that you can participate in. That's good evangelism too.
Yeah, Alfonso, we'll see what we can do to help you out with that one.
Okay, that'll be great.
Okay, so you want to read that one?
The Lord of heaven is supreme. Those who commit sin will not ascend on high, but those who walk in the paths of righteousness shall find a place in heaven. We are assured of the life hereafter if we know truth. The soul of man may ascend to the highest heaven, there to develop its true spiritual nature to attain perfection. The estate of heaven delivers man from the bondage of sin and introduces him to the final beatitudes. The righteous man has already experienced an end of sin and all its associated miseries. Self is man's invincible foe, and self is manifested as man's four greatest passions: anger, pride, deceit, and greed. Man's greatest victory is the conquest of himself. When man looks to God for forgiveness, and when he makes bold to enjoy such liberty, he is thereby delivered from fear. Man should journey through life treating his fellow creatures as he would like to be treated.
All right, thank you.
That's pseudo-animism or Jainism from that quote.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah, that's 131 of the world's religions. I'm not familiar with it. Some Eastern religion.
I didn't hear what you said, Dave.
Yeah, on paper 131 is the world's religions, and this quote is in section 6, pseudo-animism or Jainism. That's some Eastern religion, I think. I'm not familiar with it.
Okay, go ahead, Jenny.
It is interesting to note that the teachings in this paper are mostly the teachings of the missionaries of Melchizedek.
Yes.
And it's amazing, the beautiful teachings. Those missionaries must have been persons that were spiritually illuminated and people that lived the teachings with all their heart. Because if it did not do in this way, they will not be capable to transmit such beautiful teachings, such illumination. That is pure truth, beautiful truth. And I love this paper.
All right, thanks, Jeannie.
It did say that they went through the religions and cherry-picked basically the very best of the concepts of each of the religions.
Yeah.
And obviously they wouldn't have been included if they hadn't considered them to be worthy truths.
Yeah.
So yes, there's a lot of beautiful.
They took that all positive.
Mm-hmm. Rick and I just stopped at the Baha'i temple up in
Chicago, yeah.
Evanston.
Evanston, yeah.
Yeah, and it was beautiful. And they had some beautiful sayings outside that you could read. It was open to the whole world. It's beautiful.
All right. The theme of Jesus' teaching on Mount Gerizim was that he wants all men to see God as a father friend, just as he, Jesus, is a brother friend. And again, he impressed upon them that love is the greatest relationship in the world. Oops, I forgot to highlight greatest relationship there. The greatest relationship in the world, in the universe, just as truth is the greatest pronouncement of the observation of these divine relationships. Okay. I'll read this one.
Okay.
I'll give you the long ones.
Yeah. I, Jesus, is speaking. Jesus, I have called upon you to be born again, to be born of the Spirit. I have called you out of the darkness of authority and the lethargy of tradition into the transcendent light of the realization of the possibility of making for yourselves the greatest discovery possible for the human soul to make. The supernal experience of finding God for yourself, in yourself, and of yourself, and of doing all this as a fact in your own personal experience. And so may you pass from death to life, from the authority of tradition to the experience of knowing God. Thus will you pass from darkness to light, from a racial faith inherited to a personal faith achieved by actual experience, and thereby will you progress from a theology of mind handed down by your ancestors to a true religion of spirit, which shall be built up in your souls as an eternal endowment. And if I might say for just a moment,
Sure.
quickly, my favorite quote from the Bible, Romans 13:12. Check it out. It's time for us to put on the armor of light. So it reminds me of this, passing from darkness to light.
Yeah. All right. And then, so this is saying that the greatest discovery possible in the human soul, or for the human soul to make, is the supernal experience of finding God for ourself, in ourself, and of ourself, and of the doing of all this as the fact of our own personal experience. So when people say, well, prove God exists to me, just say, I'm not going to deny you the joy of your own greatest discovery, or something like that. So
yes. I share there are two persons in their short life you can never run away from. That's God and yourself.
there you go.
And sometimes an atheist will argue with me. I may close with that statement. I have many ways of sharing with atheists. And once in a while, out of 1,000 atheists, one or two might see the light and later read the Urantia Book, maybe. We'll see.
Yeah.
But I'm not bordered by a lack of enthusiasm. I've got all this inner enthusiasm. I like the Energizer Bunny. I'll keep going.
There you go. There you go. All right. We'll keep going too here. Let's see here. When they had finished breakfast, and while others sat by the fire, Jesus beckoned to Peter and to John that they should come with him for a stroll on the beach. As they walked along, Jesus said to John, John, do you love me? And when John answered, yes, Master, with all my heart, the Master said, then John, give up your intolerance and learn to love men as I have loved you. Devote your life to proving that love is the greatest thing in the world. It is the love of God that impels men to seek salvation. Love is the ancestor of all spiritual goodness, the essence of the true and the beautiful. So love is the greatest thing in the world. Okay.
Selfish men and women simply will not pay such a price for even the greatest spiritual treasure ever offered mortal man. Only when man has become sufficiently disillusioned by the sorrowful disappointments attendant upon the foolish and deceptive pursuits of selfishness, and subsequent to the discovery of the barrenness of formalized religion, will he be disposed to turn wholeheartedly to the gospel of the kingdom, the religion of Jesus of Nazareth.
Okay, so I think the greatest spiritual treasure probably refers back to like our last quote about the experience of finding God for herself.
Yes.
So this one I had a screen in there for commentary, but we're going to skip that one. I didn't do this on purpose to end up with the short ones. The kingdom of God is within you was probably the greatest pronouncement Jesus ever made. And next to the declaration that his Father is a living and loving spirit. So the kingdom of God is within you is the greatest pronouncement Jesus ever made. And then read that.
To follow Jesus means to personally share his religious faith and to enter into the spirit of the Master's life of unselfish service for man. One of the most important things in human living is to find out what Jesus believed, to discover his ideals, and to strive for the achievement of his exalted life purpose. Of all human knowledge, that which is of greatest value is to know the religious life of Jesus and how he lived it.
All right. And this is the last one. The greatest thing about study group, this is not from the Urantia book, by the way. The greatest thing about study group is sharing this time with all of you. Thank you. Back to you, Gina.
Thank you, Rick.
Thank you.
Beautiful. I love it.
This is great. Maybe we can do some more in the future.
Sure, absolutely. Well, that's one of the things I hope to make people aware of is the power of these search engines, that just picking out one word like that, the depth that you can get with that word and the broad topics that it brings out, which just by searching for one particular word.
I'm going to do a topical study on the home coming up. This will be my study number 101 that I publish on my website. That will be quite a long study, a home and family. I think that's necessary right now in this age, so that will be my next major study.
Maybe you can send us the link to that when you get it ready, please.
Yeah, well, it'll be published weekly or 3 times a week. I publish it on my website, which is purechristians.org. Homepage, left column. It's where I Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 8 p.m. Central Time. I publish that, and that will be probably I don't know, within another month. I'm on topical study 100, so probably that will start in maybe 3 or 4 weeks, rough guess.
Okay, thanks, Dave. Thanks, Alfonso, for being there too, buddy.
Thank you very much. I think this meeting was beautiful. It was intimate and full of light and discernment, and it was a friendly conversation. I love it.